Today we're going to be looking at the physical geography of Asia, specifically as relates to the classical period, and even more specifically as relates to cultural diffusion and trade in the classical period. Asia is a giant, complicated, fascinating continent, and we are definitely not going to get through all of the aspects of its physical geography and how they affect the human geography of Asia today. Today, we just need to focus on two aspects of Asian geography that make trade difficult, and then two aspects of Asia that kind of swoop in to save the day to make trade possible. This is important, again, because when we talk about trade, it's not just about exchanging goods, it's about communicating over long distances with very different cultures, and that's usually the kind of thing that makes history happen. So, Asia is home to mountain ranges like the Himalayas. If you look at the map just north of India, there's an arrow pointing to those big mountains. You can see how that might close off part of the continent from communication with everywhere else. Asia is also home to really big, really difficult to navigate deserts. Specifically, look at that giant desert just north of the Himalayas and just under the insanely cold part of Siberia. Often topographical features like that make communication really hard. And indeed, these mountain ranges and deserts make Asia very hard to cross and make long-distance overland trade very difficult, but not impossible. And here is where we get to the part of the story where those pastoralists that we talked about in the last unit come into play. Remember, pastoralists are people who migrate with their flock. So they're used to navigating in pretty difficult terrain, and so they become really key to any story of cultural diffusion overland in Asia in this period. One thing about Asia's physical geography that makes overland trade, like Silk Road trade, possible are oases. Oases in the desert are like little spots where you can find water, so that you can like take your caravan of camels, water them, water yourself, and keep going. They're really hard to find if you're just looking for them. So that's where pastoralists and their specialized knowledge of the terrain really comes into play. In terms of monsoon winds, so overland trade, difficult, not impossible. Asia also had oversea trade in the Indian Ocean. Normally, giant oceans in this period of history would block people where they were, but the Indian Ocean was home to monsoon winds that blew in predictable directions at predictable times of year, which made sailing those oceans relatively easy and allowed for the Indian Ocean trade network to develop. And here are some pictures of that. You'll see that the Indian Ocean trade network over here connected India with Arabia, with the coast of Africa, with China. And the monsoons blew according to the season. So between November and February, you could sail from India to Africa just because the wind would take you there. And then April and September, you'd go right back. Silk Road trade's pretty cool too. And I'm going to take every excuse I can to show you as many pictures I can of it because it's just a fascinating trek. When you look at this map of the Silk Road trade, like it wasn't one road, it was just a bunch of different trade networks that people would use to get from east to west, all the way from Rome to China. Consider walking that distance and what that would mean. It's just a fascinating thing that happened to begin with, given the terrain. And we're going to get to look at all of the different kinds of cultural diffusion that occurred as a result. Like what happens when Roman culture encounters Chinese culture or Indian culture. It's the best part of history, if you want my opinion. Not that you asked for it, but here I am monologuing by myself, so you can't stop me. Okay. And that's where we stop.